create our snippets. A snippet is one of these screen links that has an additional bit of functionality. It can have data extracted from it, and or it can have data pasted to it. For today's example, we're going to build snippets that provide both. You can extract data from them, you can read 1049 Park Avenue, or you can paste data to it and change the address line 1. Let's get to it. I'm going to right-click in Snippets and choose New. Move my target window over. Now, when I select an anchor, the address anchor that we just created as a marker is what I'm going to start with. Remember, that's the address anchor. I'm going to just drag my crosshairs here, and I'm going to select address line 1. If I click the Advanced Path Editor, you can take a look at the path and see how much shorter it is than it was before when I showed you before. Because now the path reads, starting with the marker called address anchor, find the second window, and underneath that, find the first text box. Okay? So as you can see, this requires only 2 steps for each one of these fields, and you're only going to be resolving the address anchor once. So you can see how the efficiency really comes in. I'm going to click OK. I always click Highlight Node just to make sure I know which object I have. What I've selected is a screen link or a node, and here it's showing me that it's of type text. Now, all of these we refer to as screen links. Each one of these objects that are on screen is, to the Windows API, an accessibility object or an MSAA object. That stands for Microsoft Active Accessibility. Each one of these accessible objects has a number of properties that Windows exposes. If I go into the Advanced Path Editor, you can take a quick look and see all of the properties that this Windows object has. We expose these nodes for you in the node detail list box, and you can see it has a value, and the value property is the data we're looking at, 1049 Park Avenue. It's also got some other things like a selected property, a visible property. It lets you know whether it's off screen. I'm going to click Cancel here. Okay, so in this particular case, we're looking at the address line 1. I'll call this ADD line 1. And I could provide a description. I never do. But the connector is really where the rubber meets the road. At this point, we have to provide some way of getting the data, extracting data from the address line 1 text box and pasting data to it. Well, this is the first point where we have an extendability point. We call them connectors. Now, we provide a bunch of standard connectors, different ones for IE, different ones for standard Windows applications like you see here. But at the end of the day, you may have to write custom connectors, and I'll show you that in a minute when I'm done here. For the moment, I've selected from this connector drop-down list, I'm going to select the text. Why text? Because if you look up here, that's the type of node that I'm working with, a text node. So I'm going to grab the standard connector, and the first thing I'm going to do is test. So I'll click the test link. I get the little connector snippet tester. I can click the highlight link to make sure, yep, that's the field I'm working with. And then I can click the extract button, and it basically attempts to extract using this connector, the standard text connector, and it does return the proper value. I would then type something in here. Some junk will be fine, and hit paste. And you'll see that junk has been pasted up here. So this looks like it is a good connector. This connector will work fine. So I'm going to just select it and move on. So I've just created the address line 1 snippet. Now I have to do address line 2. So I'm going to move a little quicker now. I'm going to select the same address anchor. I'm going to select it that same way. I'll name it ADD line 2. I'm going to select the same connector because that connector worked before on the other text box. I'll give it a quick test. At least extract to make sure it's right. Okay, we're good. Click OK. And I'm going to move on and do the same thing. Grab the city box. Take the same connector. Do a quick test. Hit extract. Yes, it looks good. Okay. And let's move on to the state. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to select the address anchor and select the state box. Now this is interesting because what you're noticing here is that a combo box actually consists of a number of subparts. That's the combo box itself, but if I go to the middle, I can select a static text object or a push button object. Usually in this scenario, you want to select the combo box. There's a couple of ways of doing that. You can kind of move your crosshairs around and you can actually get the red dot right over the outside of it and you can actually get it that way. Or there's a handy little thing built into Ratchet-X where if you're hovering over something and you hold down the control key, I'll do that now, Ratchet-X will jump up and show you the parent of whatever you're hovering over. Then as I let go of the mouse and finish the drag drop, it has just selected the combo box node or screen link. Okay? So now that I've got the state, I'll call this state. That's my snippet name. Now in this case, I'm working with a different type of object. I'm not working with just a text object. I'm working with a combo box. So let me try the standard combo box and make sure that that works properly. I'll click the test link, hit extract. Yes, it returns New York. Let's CT and click paste and see if it works. Yep, it works fine. It selected the state. So in this case, I'll use our standard combo box connector. I'm going to click OK. We're done with state. And the last snippet that we will be needing is the zip. Now, I just want to point out that sometimes you have to realize when you're around these windows, you might be accidentally grab the wrong window. You'll notice as I'm on the interior of this text box, I'm grabbing the text screen link. But when I move to the outside, I'm grabbing the window. Now, you should be aware of that because from time to time, a common error that I make is I grab the window. And when I do grab the window and then I try to use a connector for the text box, and I would click test, it wouldn't work. And then I'd say, oh, what did I do wrong? First thing I do is look up here and say, oh, I grabbed the wrong one. Sometimes, because they're really right on top of each other, sometimes you grab the wrong one. So I'm going to grab the zip text box. There we go. I've got a node type of text. And then I'm going to give a quick test, make sure we're good. Yep, we're extracting that value, and we are good. I'll call this zip code. Click OK. All right. At this point, we have grabbed all of the snippets that we need. And that's pretty good. So we've established connectors for each one of them, and each one of these values can be extracted from or can be pasted to. Which brings us to our final step, and this requires a little bit of explanation. Conceivably, in many cases, you're going to build an action that action is aware of specific regwinds, that action does know that it is specifically working within, let's say, my CRM sample app, and will have hard-coded within that action, will be representing, will integrating with specific fields in this screen. That's very common. But the use case that I described earlier today was to build an action that the same action works on both the People tab and on the Company tab. And then certainly it would be useful to build that action so that action could work on any regwin that contains an address. So in this case, we would be talking about building an action that is that is regwin and appspace neutral. It doesn't know or care about what specific application it's working with. In order to do that, it would then have to have some other layer of abstraction, a layer of abstraction that allows that action to say, hey, I don't care about the details of your appspace or your regwin. All I care about is that you provide these specific fields. That layer of abstraction is what we refer to as an ExModel. An ExModel is created using our ExModel editor. Here it is here. And it's usually created by the author of an action. I'll be showing you an action in a moment. And it's as simple as saying File, New, and adding some elements. I'm going to have an ADD line 1. I'm going to have an ADD line 2. Maybe putting a little bit of descriptive information here. And I'd basically be listing all of the parameters, essentially, that my action will be taking. Okay? Now, in the interest of moving quickly, I am not going to create the ExModel now. That ExModel has already been created and is part of our tutorials. And let's open it now. Okay. We refer to an ExModel when it's mapped to snippets as mappings. And you'll see we have a tab here for mappings. I'm going to click Add. And it asks me to enter a URL where I could type in http:// whatever is the URL to where I'm storing my ExModel. Remember, my ExModel, like all our assets, is very simply a XML file, so it can easily be stored on one of your internal web servers or external public web servers, whatever you want. You can also locate it on the local file machine this way, on the local machine this way. You always should be careful there because this kind of assumes that you're building an app space that will probably only work on this specific machine because you're becoming machine specific. But there's another way. If I didn't want to use HTTP, we have something called install folder : and that references the folder in which Ratchet-X is installed on this machine. In that folder, there's a samples subfolder. And within there, we can find ratchet-x.addressVerification.exModel. Okay. So at this point, we have grabbed that ExModel that we're referencing. We're referencing it in this way that it will always be the same from machine to machine to machine. We're not specifying anything on the machine that's hard-coded to that machine. That's being hidden for us through the use of this thing called install folder. And here are the values that are part of this address verification ExModel. It contains an ExModel element called ADD line 1. You'll notice this is the description for it. ADD line 2, city, state, and zip. Now let me point out that there is an asterisk here. As a convenience, Ratchet-X will, when you add an ExModel mapping, Ratchet-X will go through the snippets to see if any of the snippets contain the same name as the element name. And if so, it will automatically map it for you. So in this case, ADD line 1 is mapped to our snippet called ADD line 1. The ExModel element ADD line 2 is mapped to the snippet ADD line 2. City to the snippet city. State to the snippet state. You'll notice zip code did not get mapped because it's not exactly named the same thing. It's named slightly different. Named zip code. That's fine. So we're going to manually map that. And then lastly, there is kind of a hint or a parameter that we're passing into the action called convert to title case. Now, by default, the U.S. Postal Service keeps all of its address information in uppercase and returns that information in uppercase. If you, for various reasons, would like to have that information in title case, which is what you're seeing here, kind of where the first letter of each word is capitalized, you want to just put the word true here. Okay. So we're entering that as a constant. Notice it's not being mapped to a specific field here. that is really just being mapped to a constant value. This is providing us a way of inputting some parameters that we want this action to use to kind of to guide its execution to be a certain way. All right, so I think we're good to go now. We have created our window. We have created markers, which include a condition to determine that the people tab is true. We've included an anchor for efficiency's sake. And then from that anchor, we have attached 5 different snippets, these fields here. Each of them has a connector that can extract and or paste data to and from. And then we have created mappings. And our mapping, we have mapped it to the ExModel called Ratchet-X.AddressVerification.ExModel. And now we're good to go. So I'm going to choose File, Save As. I'm going to save it under the name Tutorial 1. Okay. So that's what we need for the People tab. As part of our requirement, we also wanted to do the same thing for the Company tab. So I'm going to select the Company tab now. And I'm going to quickly run through the creation of the same thing for the Company tab. If you're not interested and don't want to sit through it, feel free to fast forward. But I'm going to quickly jump through and create the same thing here. It's good reinforcement. So I'm creating a regwin called Company tab that uses my CRM as its application. I'll leave out the description. I'll say Company tab selected in my CRM for Windows. I'm going to also show the button here because this is another place that I want to be able to launch the action from. Select the window, include regular expressions, remove this, put in the wildcard, test it, and it works. Now I'll add a marker. From the root, I will create the first condition, which is the Page tab, main condition, and make sure that this selected property equals true. I'm sorry, I grabbed the wrong window. I meant to grab the company. There we go. And I want to check its selected property, make sure that's equal to true. Company equals true, that's good. Yes, this is required for regwin recognition. Now let me create an anchor. In a similar fashion, from the root, I will create an anchor to the address grouping. We'll call this address anchor. Does not require any validation, nor is it required, should I evaluate it until needed. Then let me go back to my window and do a test. Okay, it's found. Let's see what happens when the People tab is selected. Not found. Let me go back. Found. Okay, so far so good. We've got the window. We've got the markers in place. Now let's just create our snippets. All my snippets will be derived from that address anchor. I need address line 1. That will use the connector called standard text. Let me just make sure it works. It does. You'll notice that once you've worked with text boxes in a specific application, almost all of those text boxes will probably use the same connector. So I put less, as I've created more and more snippets, I do less testing of each snippet to make sure the connector works, because generally within a specific application, all the text boxes will work the same. From time to time, you'll see a slight difference, especially if it's formatting for like dates or currency values. It might be actually a different control under there. Okay, so let me create address line 2. Create city. Oops. Let me create state. I'm going to hold the control key down, make it easy for me to select. I'm going to use the combo connector. I'm going to test it again. Make sure this works. Yes, it works. We're in good shape. Click OK. And last but not least, from the address anchor, let me create the zip. This time I'll just call it zip instead of zip code. And it will use the standard text connector. Click OK. And that's it. We've defined all of these snippets that we need on the company tab. And lastly, I'm going to create the mapping for it. Once again, install folder, / samples / Ratchet-X address verification.xmodel. There we go. You'll notice this time it has automatically mapped zip because they all actually match properly. And convert to title case, I'll give that a constant value of true. And we are good to go. Hit File, Save. And now we have created and completed the app space.